Alright, first let's get started making the dough. This time we're using the Fleischmann's active dry yeast, so we're going to add 2 teaspoons of this to 1/4 cup of warm water. Alright, and then add 1 teaspoon of sugar. Mix it all up. And let that sit for about 15-20 minutes. And this time we're going to do 3 cups of the bread flour so we can make a bigger batch. Alright, then I just make a little bit of a pit in the center to pour that yeast into. You can see how much that yeast has expanded and foamed up. It's ready to go. Alright, and then we'll just add 2 cups and 3/4 of a cup of water, since we already have 1/4 of a cup of water in there. The poolish is always made with half water and half flour. There's the 3/4 cup. And just mix it up until it's nice and smooth. There we have it. It'll kind of look like a pancake batter. And I just like to clean up the edges of the bowl here so it's nice and neat. Just use a rubber spatula to do that. Alright, and just cover it with some plastic wrap, or if you have a top for your bowl, that works as well. It's a good idea to pop some air holes in the top to let the gas escape from the yeast. Alright, and after 24 hours, the poolish is ready. As you can see, it's very bubbly now. So first up, we're going to add teaspoon of salt. We're going to start adding the rest of the flour in. Those are half cups. I like to use the half cups so I can kind of control how much is in there. And we are going to add 2.5 cups of flour total. Start mixing that up. Keep scraping underneath and folding it over the top is the method I use. And once you get it fairly integrated, You can go ahead and pour it out onto your surface. Then we can get started with the kneading. I decided I need a little bit more flour, so there's another half cup. Although I poured about a 1/4 cup there. Putting the flour on top and to the sides and pressing it down into it. Second here, I notice it's getting too sticky, so I add the rest of the flour. Just place some of the flour on top so you can press down on it. Get it off your fingers because you want to use every bit of flour that you put on there. I like to use the spatula to kind of scrape it back towards the center, and then knead it some more. Starting to firm up with all that flour integrating. But it'll start to get sticky soon. And that is adding the olive oil. We're doing 2 tablespoons here. You could probably even do 3, but it's good to start with 2 and just kind of integrate that and see how it's feeling before you add more. Just keep wiping it into the oil and picking up the rest of the flour. Roll it into it. Press it down, fold it over, because that's what we do. Just keep mopping up all that oil and flour on your surface with it. Kneading it down, folding it over. Just get it into kind of a rough ball shape. Try to get all that dry looking flour integrated into it. So it feels nice and strong. Then just start tucking it in underneath. You want to get all those gaps closed up in there. And I'm just using the spatula to scrape the rest of the oil and the flour into it. So I don't like to waste any of this. And it cleans up the mess a little bit doing this. And we're just going to keep kneading it, folding it over, tucking it in. Starting to get to that ball shape. Slam it down. That helps getting the air out of it. And then just keep tucking it in. And there's your rough ball. We're going to cover that up with the bowl for 15 to 20 minutes. Alright, now that it's rested, we can do the final formation of the ball. Get your oil in the bowl you're going to use. Make sure it's coating the bottom and the sides. And then just get some oil over top of the dough. Spread it around a bit. Now we start pushing it inwards till it's a bit longer. Getting underneath it and then lifting up, letting it stretch down under your hand, plopping it down, and do the other side, let it plop down, let it stretch and plop it down, then tuck it in. You'll start to see that really smooth texture coming out of it. Do it a couple more times until it doesn't really stretch anymore. It's looking good. Just keep tucking it in. You want to get that air pocket out of the bottom by closing it up, squeezing it inwards, get that nice bowl shape pops. Alright, that's looking pretty good. Nice smooth surface. Nice and strong. So we're going to go ahead and put it in the bowl. And then just cover it up. This time you want the seal to be airtight. We don't want that ball to dry out. And it's more economical to have a lid for your bowl, but I just happen to have plastic wrap. Once I run out, I probably won't use this method. I'll just use some sort of cover. Make sure it's nice and airtight, and there you go. Put it in the fridge for another 24 hours. Alright, let's get started on the fresh tomato sauce. We got our donated canned tomatoes and tomato paste. Let's get it open. And I went ahead and used that entire can of diced tomatoes. But we're going to use half a can of this tomato paste. Use the rest of that can for another batch later. Alright, let's pick some basil from my garden. Fresh basil definitely tastes the best. Hopefully I can keep this plant alive in the winter. And you can see the mint plant behind it, which I haven't figured out what to use for. There we go, we got enough. Alright, let's process some garlic for the sauce. Same method as always. Smash it down, then peel it. I'm using maybe 5 or 6 cloves of garlic for this recipe. Alright, let's get a tablespoon of olive oil into this sauce. And we'll get our fresh picked basil in there. Delicious. And 1 teaspoon of salt. Some of that Italian seasoning that was donated. Thank you. And let's get the garlic in there. Using this bloody fucking knife to scrape it. And that wasn't a jump cut. I am just that fast loading up the garlic. Yep, it's pretty strong. But once that garlic cooks into it, it's not quite as strong. Just very tasty. Get it all mixed up and integrated, and we'll cook it at medium to medium-low heat. Oh yeah, and don't forget the sugar. We're gonna do a tablespoon of sugar. This is optional if you like your sauce to be more sour. Alright, it's simmering up. We're gonna add, I think that's half a cup of water. That way the sauce doesn't get too thick and cook down too fast, because we want to simmer it for maybe 45 minutes total. And I like to add a tablespoon of butter as well, kind of smooths it out, gives it a sweeter taste. And we're going to make it a little bit spicier, so I'm going to be adding half a teaspoon of these red pepper flakes. Sauce is just about done. Let's give it a taste. Yep, got a good taste. Alright, the sauce is done. It's a little bit cooled off, so we're going to get it in the blender. Process it down. If you like the chunky sauce, you don't need to do this. I find the smoother sauce is easier to work with. Integrate it with the pasta or spread it on a pizza easier, so this is how I like to do it. Just don't blend it too long, just a couple of quick blends. I use the pulse setting. And that's pretty much all you need to do. Now I'm just going to store this in a container overnight. It gets a lot more flavor when you leave it in the fridge overnight. Saucy. Very saucy. Give it one more taste. Oh, so good. Alright, it's the next day. We're ready to make the dough. Look at how much it's expanded since then. Those air bubbles. It's beautiful. Kind of pull it away from the edges so you can get it out of there. See those big air bubbles starting to inflate. So satisfying. Look at that. And just kind of plop it out. And we're going to go ahead and flip it over because we want the top side up. And just kind of stretch it out evenly. We're going to cut some long strips into this. And if you see those air bubbles, just kind of pat it down so it's all flattened. And we'll take a pizza cutter and just cut those strips into it. We're going to do 2 smaller strips, and then we're going to leave this one larger for the bread loaf. Alright, just lay it out and stretch it out a bit. Let's oil up the bread pan. Spread it around. And what I'm going to do for the bread loaf is just kind of fold this. So I fold it over in half. Then I fold it over again. And I just kind of roll it inwards into kind of a log shape. And just keep tucking it in. And we can place it right in there. It'll expand quite a bit. We're going to leave it in there for about 3 hours to rise with a towel on top. And we're going to turn the rest of these into pizza doughs. We're going to make these into the normal balls where you just tuck it inwards and stretch it over the top. Keep tucking it in and then stretching it over. And then you can clean up those gaps in the bottom by pinching it inwards. We'll get that one cleaned up in a little bit. If you have a more hydrated dough, it's easier to tear it during this portion. But this is a less hydrated dough, so it's a little bit stronger. And if they're not perfect, it's okay, you can fix them later. That one's looking pretty good though. Gotta get those gaps tucked in, sealed off. But we are good to go, I think. Alright, the bread has been rising for 3 hours. You can see it's pretty much filled out the bread pan. So we're going to start with some oil on top. Olive oil again. I pat it around evenly. And this will let the seasonings we're going to use stick to the top. And it'll brown up the top quite nicely. First we're going to start with some salt. And just kind of sprinkle an even layer over the top. Helps it get that nice dry crust. Not too much, just an even coating. And this time we're going to use the donated Italian seasoning. Sprinkle that on top. It's really any kind of seasoning you like on your bread. Nice even layer, and then we're also going to be doing the sesame seeds. Again, a nice even layer. And that is looking good, ready for the oven. Alright, the oven is preheated to 425 degrees Fahrenheit. Let's get it in there. And we'll be baking that for 25 to 28 minutes. And that's the exact color that we want. Looking good. And we're going to let that cool for at least an hour, maybe 2 hours. I like to use this wire rack here. Beautiful looking loaf. Let's get another look at that beast. Oh yeah, so tasty. It's tempting to eat it while it's warm, but it's a good idea to let it cool off. Alright, let's process the onions to make our pasta meal. And I'm doing the common method to dice it up. Put off the end there and get the peel off. Then you just slice along the lines of it. And then cut the other way to dice her up. Very fast. Alright, we're all ready to sizzle those up. Alright, get some olive oil in the hot cast iron pan. Get that oil all spread into the pan. We're going to cook up some of this mild Italian sausage. This amount is usually good for this meal. And just kind of break it up as it cooks. Maybe add a little bit of salt. Keep breaking it up until it's fully cooked. And that should be done. You just set it aside in a bowl. And we'll use this later when we cook up the pasta sauce with the pasta. Look at that color. Alright, a little more oil. And let's fry up those onions. And I do know what I'm doing with them. A little bit of salt. Get them nice and caramelized. And when they're done, you can just toss them in the same bowl because we're going to mix all this together. Those are looking done. This adds a really nice flavor profile to the already delicious tomato sauce. I highly recommend this. It's also good with some bell peppers. Beautiful. Alright, let's prepare our bread loaf for the cheesy garlic bread we're gonna make. Lovely color on that loaf. I like to cut it from the side here so you don't squish the top of it. Use a nice serrated knife and slowly saw through it. I want to squish that bread. And yes, I love the end pieces. It's the best part. Make sure it's a nice thick cut of bread for the garlic bread. And we got some garlic butter that I prepared earlier with minced garlic, butter, and olive oil. Also a little bit of salt. Get a nice even spread on there. This stuff is so delicious. And of course a little bit of the mozzarella cheese. Not too much. And we're just going to do a little bit more of that Italian seasoning. You could also drizzle a little bit of the olive oil over top of the cheese. Those are good to go in the oven once it's almost done. Alright, we got our water boiling for the pasta. We're going to put half a teaspoon of salt in. A little bit of olive oil. And get our pasta in there. And I let this pasta cook for about 7 minutes. I like al dente because once we cook it in the pan, the noodles are going to cook even more. And those are just about ready. Give a couple of tastes and see if they're a little bit chewy but also soft. Usually the best point to fry it in the cast iron pan. Alright, we'll go ahead and strain this right away, but make sure to keep some of that water. We're going to use it in a little bit. Steamy. Alright, a little bit more oil in the pan. It's time for the final step. We're going to get our fresh tomato sauce in there. Kind of put enough in there to integrate into the noodles that you've cooked. And we're going to put some of that onion and sausage medley in there. So tasty. Integrate it. And warm this up on medium heat. And take some of that starch water and get it in there. Kind of water it down and help cook into the noodles. And it looks like it's ready to add the noodles into it. And at this point we can put our garlic bread in the oven. It'll take about 5 minutes to cook that, maybe 10. And let's get our pasta in the sauce. It's simmering nicely. Kind of fold the sauce over top of the pasta. Kind of like with the bread dough, but we're just folding the sauce and the pasta over itself. So it's nice and integrated. This will cook that pasta the rest of the way. I like that medium temperature to kind of sizzle it up. Gives it a really nice flavor where the sauce is cooked into those noodles. And you can add maybe about a tablespoon of butter, along with some more of the mozzarella cheese. This is obviously optional. It gives it another layer of complexity. And just kind of fold that into the noodles. And spread it out after you fold it in. You want to get every side of it fried and hot. All that cheese is melted into it with the butter. Alright, let's plate it up. Try to do smaller portions on the plate because you need some room there to twist up the spaghetti on your fork. And then I like to take a spoon to get some of that chunky sauce onto the top of it. There you have it. Looking beautiful. Alright, at this time, the garlic bread should be done. I like it a bit browned and crispy, so that's a nice color there. And a big thanks goes out to James Lionheart for making this video possible. And we'll get a little bit more of the sauce I warmed up onto the garlic bread. Alright, bon appetit everyone.